I pushed the official button and now I can really begin. So let me say welcome and Shana Tova. I'm wishing you all a very good year. And even though we're starting this year in a very unusual way, we at J-Kid Philly still want to start the year from a place of gratitude. So what better way to do that than to invite Rabbi Amy Grossblatt Pessah to join us tonight. And here's what's happening. Rabbi Amy is going to talk to us, and then we'll save time for some questions and answers. We're not going to be using the chat function during this presentation. And at the end, if you have questions, you can give us a hi sign like, hey, and then we'll know that you want to ask a question. And we really look forward to hearing what you have to say as well. So now who is this Rabbi Amy that I keep referring to? Well, Amy Grossblatt Pessah is a rabbi, an author, a spiritual director, and a mom. And she's been a Jewish educator for more than 25 years and is willing to admit it. That's pretty good. She has so many accomplishments, and I invite you all to go to her website, asoulfuljourney.com, so that you can hear more about all of her degrees and awards and all the vast things that she studied and learned and how fantastic she really is. And don't worry, I will send you that link. But Amy has been a spiritual seeker since childhood, and she studied many different approaches, many different religions, and always asking those simple questions like, why are we here? Those kind of easy to answer things. But I think the best person to explain all of the wonderful things about Rabbi Amy is Rabbi Amy herself. So please, I invite you all to welcome Rabbi Amy Grossblatt Pessah.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun to get to know you, Lisa. And I thank you and Gabrielle as well for inviting me to speak to the J-Kid Philly community. I am phoning in or zooming in from Boca Raton, Florida, where I have been living for 22-ish years. And I have recently written a book called Parenting on a Prayer, Ancient Jewish Secrets for Raising Modern Children. And the information that I'm going to be sharing with you comes out of that book. So what are we going to be doing tonight? I'm going to take you through a bit of a conversation about how do we find blessings in the mess. And what do I mean by that? I think many of us could agree that it's been a really messy year specifically. Perhaps, all of life, I guess we could offer is potentially messy, especially with young kids in the mix. And it doesn't mean that it can't be fun and wonderful. It just is messy. And the question that I want to discuss with you all tonight is how do we find blessings in that mess? And I'll start really with a story. I have two kids who are in college. So I have a daughter that we took out to Denver this year, and I have a son who is in school in Chicago. And he was all set to leave on Wednesday, September 2nd. And 5 days prior, we get an email from his university that says, we're really sorry, but we're not allowing freshmen or sophomores on campus. And so you're going to be virtual for at least fall quarter and maybe winter quarter, and we'll have to see about spring. So if you can imagine, almost, packing up, getting ready to go, airline tickets, everything was, organized and done. He was going, or we had the whole thing arranged, and it was like somebody just pulled the rug out from under him. And we looked at each other like, is this a joke? Is this really happening? And he looks at me and he says, well, at least I'll have good food for the next several months. And it was just such a moment of I'm so grateful that he could find the blessing in the mess, right? So how do we look for or see things in a way that allow us to find some positivity when things seem to be really uncertain and really out of control? And so that is what I'm hoping to explore with you all this evening. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to be going back and forth between the PowerPoint and conversation, and I hope that you'll feel comfortable to chime in and share your thoughts and experiences. So here we are, J-Kid Philly, finding blessings in the mess. As Lisa shared, I have many different titles, but I have to be honest and say that mom is my most cherished and favorite. And honestly, it's the one that I have learned the most about myself in and the most about life. So the overview for the evening is going to be welcome, which we've already done. What is blessing? What does Judaism have to say about blessing? What do you have to say about blessings? And then I'm going to offer some practical ideas of how to count our blessings and how to find blessings in the mess. And then towards the end, we'll wrap up. So one of my favorite pithy expressions, if you're going to be miserable when you're sick, be thankful when you were well, right? So it's sort of, you know, might bring like a little bit of a chuckle. And I think there is truth to that, right? When everything is working and our bodies are moving the way that they're supposed to be and our life is going the way, I'm going to put in quotes, you know, it's supposed to be, or the way that we envision it, you know, sometimes it's hard to remember to be thankful because things are just going the way that we are, right? And all of a sudden something happens and we get sick and I can't believe it, and why am I sick, right? So if we're going to be miserable when we're sick, let's figure out a way to be thankful when we are well. The word for blessing in Hebrew is bracha, and you might be familiar with the word baruch as it starts many of our prayers. The first letters, or the three root letters, are bet, resh, and kaf. They mean to bless. Interestingly, the word berech is knee, right? So it's almost symbolizing this sense of we sometimes for prayers, we bow at the knee to show respect and to show humility. And another interesting word association is brecha, which is a pool. And oftentimes in Jewish mystical tradition, the word bracha, right? We sort of anglicize it. So bracha in Hebrew, but we might say a bracha, a blessing, has this similarity to a fountain of blessings, right? This pool, and how, if you imagine a pool, it is filled with water. And so our tradition teaches that the word bracha, blessing, has this sense of a pool, that it is something that can flow over into our lives. So I'm gonna stop the sharing, and I want to get a sense from you all what your experiences or what your thoughts are about blessings. So is there anyone who would like to chime in about the role that blessing plays in their life? And if that word isn't comfortable, maybe to use the word gratitude. Are there ways that you express your gratitude? Are there practices that you have? How does that play into your life, or does it not? So I'm going to let you unmute yourselves, or I think there's a feature to raise your hand if you're able to figure that out. See how Zoom savvy we all are. Oh, yes, Joanna.
Hi, I use the raise hand feature so I know what it is.
Yes, well done.
I think it also, you know, something that's been helping me is like trying to have chunks of time. Like this is work time and this is like play with kid time, stay off phone as much as you can time, and then back to work time. Also, I'll lower my hand. So like then I feel more appreciative in the moment.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice, because it's less the sense of bifurcation. Like you have so many other things to do that it's really hard to be present. So I think that's great advice, to figure out a way to chunk out your time and your day so that you can be more present and be more aware perhaps of seeing the blessings in the moment. Thank you. That's great. Any other thoughts about what you do or how blessings or gratitude show up in your life, especially during these past several months?
Well, I know for me, I have to start every day with kind of an accounting of where I am because I have a tendency towards anxiety, just a wee bit. And I really have to start the day by that accounting. I am grateful. I'm feeling okay. I have something that gives me purpose. And I think about what my intention is for the day, and that really helps. I also just want to make the comment that even for people who are not showing their camera, they're welcome to speak. We love a disembodied voice too.
Thank you. Yeah, another great tip, and I'm going to get to that a little bit later, is Judaism actually gives us a specific formula to use every morning. So if you wake up and you say, like, I'm grateful, but, you know, like, I'm not really sure, like, what else do I say? We'll get to that a little bit further down the program. But really waking up and setting your intention even before you get out of bed, right? Even before you turn on your phone. If there's a way to just take a few moments, set your intention. What are you grateful for this morning? What would you like to happen? What's your intentions and your hopes? How can I be of service? How can I be helpful? How can I do something, as you mentioned, that brings me meaning and that I find purpose in? Thank you. Any other thoughts about blessings or gratitude in your own life and how they play out? All right, if there is no other comments, then I'll keep talking. So what do we learn from Jewish tradition about blessing? So there is a teaching in the Talmud that says we should strive to make 100 blessings a day, right? So when you first hear that, it's, what? That's crazy. How am I supposed to say 100 blessings a day? So I just want to contextualize that a little bit. And if you are a Jew who is praying 3 times a day, remember there are a lot of prayers. There are a lot of Baruch Atah Adonais in the prayer service. So if you're doing that 3 times a day, and you're also saying blessings over your food before you eat, and you're also saying blessings after your food, after you eat, you are already pretty close to 100. So then you might need, you know, maybe an extra 10 or so, or 15. Maybe one day I'll actually sit and count all the brachot that are in the services, but I'm going to, you know, wager a guess that you'd probably have maybe, I don't know, between 5 and 15 extra blessings to say. And there are actually blessings for probably most things that you can imagine. We'll be talking about that again in a little bit, but just wanted to lay out this notion of 100 blessings a day is something that our tradition teaches us to strive for. And I would add as my own personal commentary to not feel pressure and don't feel like, well, you know, if I can't say 100 blessings, what's the point of even trying, right? So just say, you know what, I'm going to strive for 5. I'm just going to try to find 5 things that I want to recite a blessing over, or I want to express my gratitude over, and to really make sure that it's a way for which you can achieve the goal. Another Jewish teaching, which I really appreciate, also comes from the Babylonian Talmud, which is the book of sort of law, lots of stories. It combines the Mishnah, which is the oral teaching, and a lot of commentary on it. And it teaches us the following. Anyone who derives pleasure from this world without reciting a bracha, a blessing, is stealing from God. And I found that pretty compelling. So I wanted to take a moment and pause and hear what you might have to say about that. What are your thoughts? Why would experiencing something beautiful or pleasurable in our world without reciting a blessing be stealing from God? What is that trying to teach us? So I'm going to turn it over to you again, and hopefully we can hear from some new voices, or if those people who already spoke want to share, that is fine too. What do you think that means?
Well, I'm sorry, but it's hard for me to keep quiet. So there you go. But if the teachings that, and if we really follow the teachings that say that God created the earth and everything that's in it, then really we owe God some amount of gratitude for all the things that we experience. Now, if you don't happen to have that belief, still there's got to be some sense of, I didn't create this world around me. So whoever I'm thanking, whatever, if it's like the force or whatever this divine ultimate power is, somebody or something or somehow it is surrounding me and I didn't put it there.
And so it's our responsibility, our obligation to say thanks.
I think so, to acknowledge that I didn't do this myself, that someone else has helped me experience like these gorgeous flowers, things that I eat all the time that I certainly didn't grow.
Yes.
One tomato plant, the tomatoes are still green, but.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. Right. If it also, I think, invokes a sense of humility, right? And it allows us to look at things, I think, from a broader perspective. Oftentimes we get really caught up in our own lives, in our own stories. And if we stop during the day and turn our attention and sort of refocus and offer thanks, I believe it takes us out of where we are personally and allows us to see things from a bigger perspective, from a grander perspective, right? So your child is having a meltdown and you're trying to go run an errand and you can't get your child in the car seat, and you know, whatever, you can sort of play out your own story and fill in the blank for your own life situation. And then you finally get into the car and you're aggravated and you pull out of your driveway and you notice out of the corner of your eye, because you've stopped to make sure there wasn't a car behind you when you're backing out of your driveway, you see a rainbow in the sky. And there's actually a blessing for that. So if you don't remember all of the Hebrew words, that's fine. But just if you stop and look up and say, wow, thank you, that's such a beautiful rainbow, right? You've now taken yourself, not that you might still not feel that internal frustration, but for a split second, you've looked up. There's a bigger world out there. There's something that is happening extraordinary. And then it actually might be a good way to distract your child as well, right? So look, there's a rainbow in the sky. So it also enables us to take a moment for ourselves and to also be sharing the beauty in our world with our children. And the ulterior motive could potentially be distraction, but that's if you have really much younger kids, and that's something that you need to do. I sort of say it tongue in cheek, but as a parent who's raised 3 kids, distraction was a very helpful technique, especially when they were younger. And I tried it when they were older, but they were smart enough to call me on it. They just said, Ima, which is mom, like, Ima, stop trying to distract me. Let's focus about the issue on hand, right? So it didn't totally work when they were older, but as I said, I do think it is helpful when they're younger. Any thoughts or comments to date, or questions that you have based on what I have shared so far about striving for 100 blessings, not reciting a blessing if we've partaken in this world as like stealing from God, ways that reciting blessings, helping us to find the blessings in the mess, can actually help us to extricate ourselves from the mess by allowing us to see things from a different perspective, from a bigger perspective, and might take us out of the micro and help us be placed into the macro. So did you know that there are blessings for so many things that I wanted to give some images that go with this? There is actually a blessing for seeing a rainbow, as I mentioned, right? For eating a new fruit. We actually say the Shehechianu blessing, the thank you for letting us reach this day. We recite that on Rosh Hashanah, the first day, right after we eat our apples and honey. And because we also want to say the Shehechianu on the second night of Rosh Hashanah, it's traditional to eat a new fruit. So a fruit you haven't eaten anytime during the year. So I tried to pick down here on the lower right-hand corner some exotic fruits. There is also a blessing for...
Are you going to tell us what those fruits are?
You know, I think this one in the back is a dragon fruit, and that's as far as I got. This year, we had golden berries. I had never had golden berries before. I don't know if I'd recommend them. They weren't bad, but they were a little tart. So it's a challenge to find fruits that are new because each year we add a new fruit. So maybe it would be helpful, and I will find out what these fruits are because I might need to eat them in the coming years. There is also a blessing here in the middle about reaching an important milestone. So this probably a bat mitzvah. There is a blessing on hearing good news, being grateful, whatever that news was, thank you. And there is a blessing from being saved, right? If you are in a difficult situation, if God forbid you've been in an accident of some sort, there's actually a blessing that is recited. It's called Birkat HaGomel. And oftentimes people will go to synagogue and recite that blessing, thanking God that we survived whatever it was that was our challenge. So there are also blessings for food. Many of you may be familiar with that. There are blessings for specific food. So there's, you know, this made me smile. This is like a not Adkins picture, but it's the carb diet. And so there are specific blessings for carbohydrates. There are blessings in the middle for fruits and vegetables. And again, different kinds of blessings for meat and for snacks. There's a blessing on the top right for setting out on a journey. There's blessings in the middle for mountains and beautiful creations in nature. There's a specific blessing for small trees, and there's a blessing on the left-hand side of seeing a friend and being reunited after a long time. So there are lots of ways that we can express our thanks. And so now I'm hoping that you think that this number of 100 isn't so totally crazy, because there are everywhere you turn, there's an opportunity to recite a blessing. I'd like to share some practical ways to count your blessings. So these are things that you can actually do in your own life for yourself or with your family. And the first idea is to create a blessing wall. Depending on how many people are in your family, you can give each person a Post-it note that is color-coded and set up a time. Maybe it's in the morning, or maybe it's, you know, at breakfast time or before breakfast. Maybe it is lunchtime, you need an afternoon activity, or maybe it is dinner time when you're winding things down for the day. And to have kids write blessings or things that they're grateful for on this note. If they're too young, they could draw a picture, or if they're too young to do that and they're able to speak, they can dictate and you can write down what their blessings were for the day. I just thought this was a great way, and it's a visual, so that put it somewhere in your house where you're going to walk by it. Maybe it's on your refrigerator or a main hallway. And it just is a reminder so that as people walk to and fro, they start to maybe stop and look and say, oh, right, I forgot about that. Yeah, I forgot we had that experience. That was so much fun. That was really amazing. And it starts to really create this fertile soil in your home for everyone to start thinking about, how can we find the blessings in the mess? Because the mess is always going to be there, unfortunately. Sometimes it's a little messier than other times, but how we approach that and how we sort of show up almost with our spelunking equipment, right? For those who are exploring caves, to really explore your own life and see what you can find in the mess, that would be a blessing. This is what Lisa had mentioned earlier, how she sets her intention for the day. There's a specific prayer that is Modeh Ani, or Moda for female. And you can Google it. if you want to hear it sung, there's lots of different renditions. There's also transliteration that's out there. So this blessing says, basically, thank you so much for returning my soul to me this morning. Thank you for being faithful, right? Like, I am so grateful. There's, in the more mystical tradition, Judaism teaches that when we dream, when we go to bed at night, our souls can do a little bit of traveling. And so it really is a sense of, oh, thank God, my soul wound up in the right body, and that's mine. Thank you, Moda Ani, I'm so grateful. And to say this, in your head, again, before you get out of bed, could help to recalibrate, reset, figure out how you want to start your day. Another practical tool is to put on what I call gratitude glasses, and to make sure your kids do this as well. So whether you want to get a real pair of sunglasses, whether you want to have your kids, put their pretend glasses, however you do that, with their fingers. This quote, I don't know if you can read it because it's small. It says, if you're feeling miserable, lonely, sad, or depressed, consciously shift your attention to finding things for which to be grateful or appreciative. Put on your gratitude glasses. They reframe everything. And so when things get challenging, your kids are fetching or complaining, or things are difficult, maybe you have a code phrase that says, gratitude glasses. And it's really like a moment to stop and pause. I remember when my kids were younger, we used to play freeze dance as an activity in the afternoon when it was raining out here in Florida. And they had so much energy, so we'd put on music, and then eventually I would push pause and they had to freeze. I'm sure you're familiar with the game. So it could be the same kind of, frenetic energy that's happening. And then you're going to say, okay, pause, gratitude glasses. What can you find in this moment that would help shift and would allow one to find blessings in the challenges? Another idea is around the dinner table, to share yummies and yuckies, or you can change that depending on the age of your child. And then to talk about how sometimes yummies can come from yuckies, right? So there's this thing called collateral blessings. When bad things happen or life isn't going how we wanted it to go, is there a way to find a collateral blessing? Is there a way to find something that initially seemed very detrimental and very troubling, and to turn it into a blessing, right? So I started off by mentioning my son, who is now home at least for 1/4 of his sophomore year. And he started thinking about some of the things that he wanted to do. He was going to try to find a job. He was, starting to watch different movies, and he wound up changing his major based on what he had explored over these weeks that he's been at home. And so would I say that's a collateral blessing? I would. Would he say? I'm not sure what he would say. But this sense of learning to sort of reshift and reform and almost re-amalgamate what our current situations are, and to try to find the collateral blessings in them. And the last idea is to start a gratitude journal. I don't know if you're familiar with this, or if you actually have this as part of your practice, but before bedtime, jot down blessings for the day in your blessing or your gratitude journal. And it could be 2 or 3 things that you appreciated, that you were grateful that happened. There's a lot of science out there and a lot of research that talks about positive psychology and the benefit of gratitude and how it changes your neurochemistry. And so this will all happen eventually over time. But if there are moments in your day that you can punctuate with gratitude and with blessings, my hope and my prayer is that it will change the texture of your day. Now, it doesn't mean that there still won't be a mess. It just means that you'll be able to see some of the blessings in the midst of the mess. So back to you all now. I feel like I've done so much talking, and I wanted to ask if you had any thoughts or questions about what I've just shared. Maybe you have some of your own ideas in terms of activities that you do or ways that you find blessings in the mess. Any comments or questions up until this point? If you can figure out how to raise your hand, maybe have Joanna do a tutorial. I think you go to your participant, and then once you click on participants at the bottom, it gives you the option under the more category to raise your hand on the sidebar.
Well, I think I really need a tutorial on that because I don't see how to raise my hand, and I should, but I don't. But
you can still talk without raising your hand.
Exactly. Well, I do have like a sort of question comment. I thought some of the things you said were so practical because, it's easy to find gratitude or a blessing when you're having a fairly good day. But in that moment when your kids are acting out or another loved one, perhaps who lives in your home is grumpy, like how do you switch gears? And I think the idea of the gratitude glasses or the collateral blessings is such a concrete thing. And I wonder if that becomes a practice, can you really change that feeling of, the world is caving in on me? So I guess that's kind of a question for you.
Yeah, I can only speak from my own experience. I would say that once it becomes a practice, it's almost like anything else you do in your life. It's part and parcel of who you are, right? It's like brushing your teeth, so the joke in my family, which I don't think it's a joke, but everybody else thinks it's a joke. So I'm sort of outnumbered, but something will happen and it'll be not the best situation. And we'll be talking at the dinner table and I'll say, well, maybe that happened because of this, right? And everybody looks at me and they're like, you're always giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, right? So I don't realize that I'm saying it. It's just that it's become my orientation after so many years of looking perhaps from a different perspective. I remember I was driving my kids to school. This is, I don't know, 5-6 years ago at this point. And I really accidentally cut somebody off. And they rolled down their window and they pulled up next to me and they started screaming at me. And they started giving me the finger and, it was like, and my response was like, I'm so sorry. It wasn't intentional. And I hope that your day gets better. Right. It's like, so what was I modeling to my kids in that moment? What was I feeling? Like, I was actually scared because someone slowing down and pulling up next to you, we've all watched the news enough to know that it doesn't always have a good outcome. But I also was I felt so much compassion for this person that this is what made them so angry. And we had a whole conversation in the car on the rest of the way to school. And I said, like, I wonder what's going on for them, because if this is making them this angry, there must be something else happening, which led to another, discussion about how people handle their emotions. And right. But it was this sense of, I've been working for so many years on developing a practice of compassion and gratitude and blessings that my first thought really, after I realized that I was going to be safe, right? So to be honest, that was my first thought, was like, I hope I'm going to be safe. After I saw that it was more like, I just wanted this person to have a better day, right? So part of the practice is that it becomes ingrained in our thinking. And then it becomes, I think, difficult to separate that, because it's like brushing your teeth. You do it really without thinking about it. There is one other piece that I do want to offer, and that is not denying our emotions, right? So it is important, and I do believe we should be working to find blessings in the mess. And it's important to stop and acknowledge how we're feeling and say, this is a really challenging situation. Right? Like I'm not a proponent of spiritual bypassing, which basically means if you take something and look at it from a spiritual lens, then you are not working through all of the issues, right? So if you're, what's an example I would use? Let's say you had a fight with your partner and you are so angry. And instead of feeling your anger, you say to yourself, well, you know what? At least I have a partner. I'm so grateful that I have a partner that I'm just not really going to deal with my anger or my frustration, right? So that's really spiritual bypassing, like sort of passing what the issue is. So I hope that you won't leave here thinking that I am suggesting we do that, right? Everything's great. My kid just had a meltdown, but hey, there's a rainbow in the sky, so everything's good, right? Like it's a way to acknowledge and notice what else is out there and to take note of how you're feeling and to not negate it and to not squelch it. But it's a recognition where you look at your partner and you say, you know what? I'm really angry with what happened in this situation. Maybe you can talk about it then, maybe you can't. Maybe you say, you know what, let's meet up in an hour. I can't talk about it right now. I want you to know that I'm really angry. And leave it at that and acknowledge your anger. And then hopefully you'll have a conversation. You'll realize where the other person came from. And then you can say, I'm really grateful I have a partner, right? So I just don't want it to come across that I'm suggesting finding blessings in the mess is a way to not deal with reality. Does that make sense? Is that clear? I can't see any, I can see,
Okay.
I can't see anybody if they're shaking their head. So I hope it was clear that part of finding the blessings in the mess is being able to shift yourself, is being able to notice when there is positivity to be found and to recognize like, hey, I'm human and it's really hard being human and I'm going to acknowledge my emotions and I'm still going to work to find blessings in the mess. So it's a more nuanced approach. I hope that was clear. So the last piece that I wanted to share is related to, here we go, this book that has the teachings about blessings and 17 other values that I believe is important to raise children. So a few quotes from Rabbi Naomi Levy and Rabbi Brad Artson and Rachel Naomi Remen. For those of you who have heard of her, she's New York Times bestseller, wrote Kitchen Table Wisdom, also a wonderful book. I'm happy to answer any questions about more of the contents of the book if you have questions. Wanted to share that. And then the last piece is if you do have a question, you can find me at asoulfuljourney.com or you can email me at parentingonaprayer@gmail.com. So I thank you so much for listening and for sharing. Wanted to now open it up. Lisa, if you want to be the moderator, if anybody has any questions about anything that I have shared thus far, please feel free to ask.
Great, thank you so much. I found that really helpful. And, there were, for me, it was practical, but spiritual at the same time. But I do want to say, I want to turn it over to the rest of our group here. This is our chance to stump Rabbi Amy and ask some of the hard questions you may be thinking. Like how do you get from point A to point B or Z where A, B seems to be? And I would love to encourage you to ask some questions. Amy has a wealth of experience, and please, who would like to start?
Did you want to stop the recording, Lisa?
Oh, yes, I will. Thank you.
We'll stop the recording so none of that will be recorded. And then if you feel more